When the world urges you to give up, when emotions try to take control, when fear, anger, and doubt grow louder than your purpose, this is the voice that brings you back to balance. It isn't about hype. It's about focus. It's about discipline. It's about creating a life that stands firm, no matter how your feelings shift. How? Stay with us till the end, because this story could be the turning point you have been waiting for. Armin had always been ruled by his emotions. His friends often joked that his heart was like a switch, one wrong word could flip it, and his anger would flood the room like a storm. At work, he struggled to keep his frustration hidden whenever projects didn't go as planned or when a colleague missed a deadline. The smallest inconvenience could ignite his temper, and the words he spoke in those heated moments often left behind wounds he couldn't heal with apologies. One evening, after yet another argument with his boss about a report delivered late, Armin stormed out of the office and slammed the door behind him. On the drive home, his hands gripped the steering wheel, his chest burning with rage. But beneath the anger was something heavier, regret. He knew this pattern too well, first anger, then guilt, then the sinking realization that his emotions had taken control again. That night, he sat in his dimly lit room, staring at the ceiling, asking himself the question he had avoided for years: why do I let my emotions control me? The silence of the room gave him no answer, only the echo of his own thoughts. He remembered times when his anger had cost him friendships, when his impatience had closed doors to opportunities, and when his fear had stopped him from speaking up for himself. In that quiet moment, a truth surfaced: his greatest battles were not with others but within himself. The world had not defeated him, his emotions had. Armin closed his eyes and whispered words he had never spoken before: if I don't master my emotions, they will master me. That realization was both painful and powerful. For the first time, he saw the real enemy, not the world, not his boss, not his colleagues, but the storm inside his own heart. And deep down, he knew this storm could only be calmed by the strength of a disciplined mind. The morning after his realization, Armin walked into the office with a new sense of awareness, though uncertainty lingered in his chest. He had promised himself that his mind, not his emotions, would guide him, but he knew the test would come sooner than expected. By midday, it arrived. During a team meeting, his colleague Samir confidently presented the details of a project that Armin had spent weeks perfecting. Slide after slide, Samir spoke as if the ideas were his own, carefully avoiding Armin's name, stealing credit for every sleepless night and every ounce of effort Armin had poured into the work. Armin's heart pounded, and the old fire in his chest began to roar, demanding he lash out, expose Samir, and throw accusations across the table. His hands trembled under the desk, his jaw tightened, and for a split second, he felt himself slipping into the old pattern. But then, his own words from last night echoed in his mind: if I don't master my emotions, they will master me. Taking a deep breath, Armin steadied himself and waited for Samir to finish. When the room fell silent, Armin calmly raised his hand and addressed the team with a composed voice, showing the original drafts, the time-stamped files, and the emails that traced the project back to his own work. There was no anger in his tone, no bitterness, just clear evidence and a steady confidence that silenced every doubt. His boss leaned forward, nodding in acknowledgement, and the team's eyes shifted from Samir to Armin with newfound respect. Samir sat frozen, unable to respond, while Armin quietly closed his laptop, feeling an unfamiliar kind of victory, the kind that didn't come from shouting louder or reacting faster, but from thinking clearly and letting truth speak for itself. As the meeting ended, Armin walked out not with regret, but with pride. He realized in that moment that strength wasn't in controlling others but in controlling himself. For the first time in his life, he had chosen his mind over his emotions, and it had led him not to conflict but to triumph. Weeks passed after the incident with Samir, and Armin began to notice the quiet transformation taking place within himself. He no longer rushed into reactions as he once did. Instead, he paused, reflected, and chose his words with care. At first, it felt unnatural, like trying to walk against a strong wind, but the more he practiced, the lighter he became. The real test came during a company-wide presentation where Armin was tasked with pitching a new strategy to senior executives. The night before, his chest tightened with anxiety, and the old voice of fear whispered in his mind, "What if you fail? What if they laugh? What if you're not good enough?" In the past, he might have let panic consume him, but this time he remembered his commitment to let his mind lead. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and reminded himself that fear was nothing more than a feeling, not a fact. The next day, as he stood before the executives, his palms were damp and his heartbeat quickened, but he spoke with clarity, focusing not on the racing emotions inside him but on the logic of his ideas. As he moved through his points, he saw nods of approval, felt the room leaning into his words, and when he finished, the silence was broken by applause. That moment was not loud or dramatic, yet it felt like the greatest victory of his life, a silent victory over the fears that once held him captive. Outside the boardroom, colleagues approached him with genuine admiration, not just for his ideas but for his calm, steady presence. Armin realized then that leadership was not about controlling others but about mastering the storms within. His discipline had become visible, his self-control a quiet force that earned respect without demanding it. Walking back to his desk, he smiled, knowing that he was no longer the man who lived as a prisoner to his emotions. Slowly, but surely, he was rising higher, carried not by impulse but by the strength of a mind that had finally learned to lead. Months passed, and Armin's growth became impossible to ignore. The once short-tempered man who reacted to every emotion was now seen as a pillar of stability in the office. His colleagues sought his advice, not because he was the loudest voice in the room, but because he had become the calmest, the one who could cut through chaos with reason. When a major leadership position opened for a new project, the management's choice was clear: Armin was entrusted with the role. On the day of the announcement, he stood before his team, reflecting on the path that had brought him here. It wasn't raw talent, luck, or connections that elevated him, it was the quiet victories of choosing thought over impulse, clarity over confusion, and discipline over chaos. As he spoke to his team, he reminded them that emotions will always rise, often louder than reason, but it is the mind that must steer the ship. That evening, as he walked home, the city lights glowing around him, Armin thought back to the night he had whispered to himself in despair, "If I don't master my emotions, they will master me." Now, those words were no longer just a desperate thought, they had become his truth. He had learned that emotions are powerful, but unchecked they destroy, while guided by the mind, they can build. The storms inside him still existed, but he had discovered the strength to calm them. Standing tall beneath the night sky, he felt no regret, no chaos, only peace. He understood at last that the greatest victories are not the ones others can see, but the ones fought and won in silence, within ourselves. And in that truth, he found the meaning of his journey: you rise higher when your mind leads, not your emotions.